Hey, Maria, welcome to the show.
Hi, Brittany. Thanks for having me.
Definitely very, very happy to have you on the show. It's been a long time coming. I know we rescheduled a few times because you had like a really big LP anchor meeting last minute, and I was like, get it, girl. Don't
Yeah.
worry, get the money, get the money. And then I had my summit. And so it was, I'm glad that we're finally chatting. And I have faith that the universe was like, just wait to tell her story. Wait to tell Maria's story. Not yet, not yet. I think we're ready now, though.
Yes, and thank you. And I think that's good news that we're both busy as women's health. We people 10 years ago were twiddling their thumbs because nobody was interested in women's health or having anything to do with it. Now you're running whole conferences about women's health. I'm talking to investors who want to invest in women's health. So we're definitely on a good trajectory now.
Yes, yes, yes. I think it's, because we're raising our Coyote Ventures as well, and people are like, wait, how many deals do you see a day? And we're like, yeah, literally there's that many. I see your face, you're like, yeah.
And when people question, well, I don't know if you'll have enough deal flow. I'm like, I just don't have enough money. And they're like, but aren't there a couple of other funds doing this? Yeah, we all don't have enough money. There's
No,
so much innovation in the category. There's just not enough money. And I'm excited about what I'm seeing. And I just wish I could fund a lot more of these
I
innovations.
know. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Oh my gosh. This is really great. Every listeners just enjoy listening on this. Two VCs chatting because we just actually, Jess and I just graduated from Founder Institute VC Lab. It's like an accelerator for emerging fund managers. And their course, they were like, you're going to have to fight with other investors. You're going to need sharp elbows. You're going to need to compete to get in the rounds. And I'm like, we have this Slack channel we just started with all the other FemTech funds, and we're gonna have quarterly meetings and share our deal memos because
Yeah.
there's so many deals, and we all need to co-invest and do it. It's very different. It's like very, very
So
different. Have you noticed that?
And
How
I
we
love that
operate
it's
with other investors?
I totally agree. I did the VC Accelerator program, VC Unlocked at Stanford University, and
Yeah.
learned a lot. And it's interesting, even when I'm talking to other investors, they're like, well, steal the whole round and do all this. I'm like, no, I want to bring in Ria and Avestria and Coyote. And they're like, why? Why wouldn't you just take it all? I'm like, because that's not how women work. And that's not how we want to grow this sector of the market. I don't want to ghost founders when they call. Like, I'm just operating differently. And I think we all have a level of respect that for the innovators in the space, and so that we're operating differently, and I hope that the sector continues to operate that way.
Maria, this is amazing. Listeners, we didn't plan this. Like, we're just naturally leading our own funds with this attitude. You're speaking of respect and not ghosting founders. We actually do give our founders feedback. Even when we pass, we say, hey, here's the deal memo and here's the problems we found. And Jess and I tell our venture partners that are new to venture, we say, by the way, mostly no one does this. Investors never give feedback.
I think it's more important to give feedback when you pass, because those are the people that need the most feedback. You didn't get the investment. Here's why. Here's what we need to see for next time. And we've had founders come back and say, here was what you said we needed to do. We've done it. And I'm like, okay, well, I guess you're ready for the chat. Like, you are serious about it. And we love founders that take feedback and incorporate it rather than doubling down, on what they previously said. And I think it's important also to know, you see, for the listeners out there, you understand how Brittany and I are talking. This is how we're all talking in the VC industry. So it's opaque and a black box to you, but we all know each other in chat. So if you go and you piss off Brittany and you give her attitude, I'm going to call Brittany and say, hey, I heard you talked to this founder last week. How is she? And she's going to say, oh, she has a terrible attitude. And I'll say, okay, pass. And so I think that they don't understand that we all talk to each other.
Oh, we talk. I have a shit list, not just founders, but like service providers, of lawyers, of like, here's the people we're going to pass on, Yeah, totally. Well, Maria, we're already like deep into it, and we're not even, we didn't start with our first question yet, which is kind of introducing you. We're just been bonding so much already. Our listeners love to learn a little bit more about the backgrounds of our guests. And so could you tell us, where you're from? What did you study? Did you have a career before venture? And how did you end up here?
Great. Well, when people ask me where I'm from, I'm kind of like a world citizen. I was born in Germany, lived in Belgium, got to the US when, permanently when I was 10. So I claim Northern Virginia, DC, Maryland area. So that's where I went to high school and grew up. And then, did undergrad at Wake Forest, was a computer science and business major there. And that's when I started my first company, because I love entrepreneurship. And I, just really was one of those people sitting around your dorm room being like, okay, twiddling my thumbs. And so I tell the story. On a Saturday night, I was just, sitting at my computer, and somebody else in the VC industry now, who wasn't before, called me. He went to Duke, and he said, hey, I know somebody else who wants to start a company. Do you want to meet him? And I'm like, yeah. So I just drove to Duke. I met this guy. He told me this idea about an online shipping and storage company for college students. And I said, okay, well, I'm a computer science major. I can help. So let's do it. So we did it, and we grew that company to be the largest online shipping and storage company for college students in the nation. And U-Haul subsequently bought it, and they're still running it today, 20 years later. So while I may look young, that's 20 plus 20 for people that can do math. But so, because people are like, oh, yeah, so been around a while. So as you said, is VC my first career? Clearly not my first career. So after that,
and not even health. It was supply chain management movement stuff, right?
Yeah. So so after that experience was really great, really understood that I wanted to be a good operator. There's a lot I didn't know at 19 years old starting a company. So spent the next 15 years just picking up tools. So went to work at Booz Allen as a IT strategy consultant, then went to NYU, got a finance degree. Then I went to Kraft to learn about product development, marketing. Then I worked at a branding agency. Then I worked in a national consulting firm where I worked in South Korea at Samsung. I worked at Philips and Amsterdam. So got to travel the world, which was really awesome, working cross-culturally, and then came back here and helped scale the largest dermatology clinic in New York. So now in the Northeast, they have over 60 locations. Amazing. That was an amazing experience. I learned so much and got to really put everything to use, all the skills I had learned along the way. And so that's really what got me interested in healthcare. And then I really wanted to learn how to invest, because we were VC backed, and I wanted to understand how they were making those decisions. So I joined Pipeline Angels as an angel investor and started investing. So about 4 years had gone by of doing angel investments. I had done about 7, 5 of them were in women's health. And I just saw this as a really huge area of opportunity. So while I was investing in female founders with the angel group, a lot of them were staying away from healthcare because, as we know, healthcare is layered, it's complex, and there's a lot of nuance to it. And, our payer and insurance system is so complicated. So a lot of people didn't feel comfortable making those investments where I did. And so I really saw an opportunity to do more. As you said, the pipeline got long, and I knew I was going to run out of money in my little angel account. So I said, this is the time I think we should, raise a fund. So partnered with one of my colleagues from Pipeline Angels, and we started last year raising a $50 million fund to invest in women's health tech.
Oh my gosh, I love it so much. You bring up a really interesting point that I've heard several times in the last year and a half is, where are the investors that invest in female founders in healthcare? And, I was like, all of the female founder funds I come across, they don't touch healthcare. They do CPG,
retail,
travel.
beauty, yeah.
And so, I'm a geneticist. I'm really excited for us to be doing diagnostics, class 1 med devices, therapeutics and class 2, class 3 med devices, a little bit too intense, a little too long. Our fund is too little for that, but that's so awesome that you feel comfortable with that. Do you think it was because of your experience with the dermatology thing, or do you have other advisors that are more healthcare oriented that you're going to lean on?
Yeah, we have a network of over 150 specialists. So from urogynecologists to embryologists, IVF specialists. So we have a very big team. But like you, we don't invest in life sciences or biotech. Again, we're looking for digital and consumer health companies that usually will have an exit in 4 to 5 years because of its technology. And especially now, post-COVID, a lot of these digital health companies are being scooped up and put into larger platforms. And so that's kind of what we're looking. And I think that's how most of the companies in our portfolio will play out, just being acquired and being a part of these larger platforms.
Yeah, totally. And so, you've been doing this, raising your fund for the last year. Have you started to make investments?
Yes, so we've made 9 investments. We have 3 more in the pipeline for the next couple months. So yeah, we're off to a great start, and our portfolio is already doing well. We have an IPO in our portfolio. We have a couple of very significant markups, and so we're really off to the races and doing well. And I think, Brittany, there's a lot of pressure and responsibility on us as some of the first women's health funds to make
Yeah.
successful, because if we don't do it, we're going to prove their point and say this wasn't a category, it wasn't big enough, it wasn't this, all the BS that we hear them telling us. We have to make sure that we prove to them that this is a market and that it's viable, and I don't think we're going to have to work very hard.
Oh my gosh. I know that. And sometimes my boyfriend's like, why are you not sleeping? And I'm like, the whole world is watching. There's a lot of pressure. And he's like, great, but I'm so grateful that you actually just said that, because it does feel like that when you're like trying to prove it to them, and you're like, damn it, we really need to. It's not going to be the industry's fault if the Coyote doesn't succeed, right? It's going to be something else. But because FemTech is so ready, it's so primed. What has your experience been like fundraising for your fund from LPs? Do you say the word vagina? Like, do they freak out? Do they tell you this is niche? Like, tell us about that experience.
Well, it's interesting. They either get it or they don't, and I can
Yeah.
tell in 5 minutes if they're getting it or they don't. It's interesting because I'll say, yeah, the speculum company we think is really interesting. And they're like, what's a speculum? I'm like, okay, this is why these companies don't get funded. You don't even know what they're working on, and so you can't expect that. But I mean, we've found a really great LPs that have been really supportive, and they love what we're doing, mission aligned. I love our female investors. I love, our male investors who understand health, and they understand how women have been understood. And they also, quite frankly, understand the opportunity, and they understand that we're going to be more likely to win these deals. Brittany and I, than, some guy who's, 60 years old in Silicon Valley. Like, they're going to want to work with us. They see our passion, they see our dedication, they see that we're authentically aligned to this space. And being a women's healthcare investor is more than writing checks. We have to move policy. We have to move social norms. We have to change advertising. There's so much more than just writing checks. And I think that we're signing up for all that. People that dabble in women's health, they're not part of that ecosystem. And so that's why I think, when people are asking me, why aren't you a generalist? Does it make sense that you're more? And I'm like, well, this area specifically comes with a lot more baggage than, your average crypto fund or something like that. But that's why I think, there's a tall order for people that sign up to invest in women's healthcare. And it's definitely much larger and much broader than some of the other funds out there.
I am feeling so heard and felt like right now. I'm like, oh my gosh, yes, that's what we're doing. We really are like taking on so much more. When I was in the accelerator program for VC funds, it was, people were like, we're a, software as a service investor in Canada. And it was just like, okay.
You're like, okay, how are you changing the world? I'm waking up and delivering period underwear to people in Ghana. Like, yeah. I mean, but that's where I think we are really lucky that we have the opportunity not only to invest in female founders and help the ecosystem, but we also can do things, introduce things in the world that help people and that are good for people. I mean, at the end of the day, we don't have to be an impact fund to create all of the great impact, because we're not an impact fund, but inherently we all are impact funds. But I don't think you have to be an impact fund to create good in the world.
I seriously, again, like, this is just so amazing. We need to talk more often, because so you're just like narrating what's in my head. I get asked all the time, are you an impact fund? And I always am like, well, not like in the sense that I'm going to call it that, but it has impact. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, are you tracking? Because if you want to call yourself an impact fund, you have to adhere to all these standards and track all these metrics.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, well, if that's what an impact fund is, I'm just somebody who does that anyway. And
Naturally.
I'll just show you that if we introduce something that's going to help menopause, it's going to help a lot of people. Like, you do the metrics on that. If that's not good enough, then I don't know what is, So it's interesting. And it's, yeah, because people think about you differently. If you classify yourself as an impact fund, so they think you're compromising returns or you're
Yeah.
doing charity work. We're not. We're making money. We're investing in founders that want to make money and have legitimate ideas. And so I hear that sometimes when we're raising, it's like, oh, we already gave to charity. I'm like, I'm not a charity. We have MBAs. You have a doctorate. Like, we're not just, so I think that having amazing women in this category and funding other amazing women, I think will help us all in the end, and also help us change what it means to be a VC investor and what it looks like to be a VC investor. 12 years ago, you and I wouldn't be having this conversation as a woman, as a person of color and a woman. There's still less than 1% of me out there, and there's barely even more of you out there. So the fact that we could be having this conversation and raising funds, I think, is really a push in the right direction.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, here I am. I normally have pink hair. I'm 29. I have 3D printed uterus earrings, right? Like, this is usually not what VC looks like. And I've actually, had a few phone calls where people are like, oh, you're starting your fund. Like, you think you'll raise in like the next 2 years? And I'm like, we're like 10% closed. We started raising like 4 weeks ago. They're like, oh, wow. Okay. Like, this is real. Yeah, this is real. Get on board, y'all. You mentioned earlier about female founders. What's your opinion on male founders in FemTech?
I support any founders that want to make a mark in women's health in general. I think it makes sense for them to have a woman on their team. And so when people come to me and they don't, I'm like, how are you innovating? And you're not even talking to the consumer. So if you have a woman on your team, I just think they'll avoid a lot of marketing mistakes. Talking to women is different than talking to men or just trying to talk mass. And I think that they just would benefit usually from having a woman on the team.
Yeah, totally. I love seeing male founders in FemTech, but if there's not a female co-founder, I'm like, right. I don't know, historically, every time I see a male only FemTech company, it's usually like pinky gloves out of Germany that they're like, we're going to make gloves so women don't have to touch their own vagina. And I'm like, okay. So like,
and I said, who asked for that? Like, again, and I'm like, who did you talk to? Like, clearly, this is what happens. And I always use some companies as an example. This is what happens when you don't have a woman on the team. You invest something that you think is useful for us, but it may or may not be. Why don't you just have a woman on the team and figure it out?
Yes. Oh my gosh. So your fund is called Steelsky Ventures. What is Steelsky? What does that mean?
Well, I was sitting on my balcony. We had just moved from Manhattan, right on the water side of Jersey. And so I was just really looking at the sky, and it was like a beautiful, steel blue sky. And I saw all the buildings were, steel. And so I just kind of came up with it. So the logo is actually the view from my brownstone at the time of New York.
Cool. There's actually a lot of fund managers in FemTech. Of the like 8 or so FemTech specific funds, I think like half of us are from Jersey.
Oh,
I think I'm like, this is statistically significant, y'all. We should like dig into this. Is it just because Jersey girls are like, I don't care what you think, I'm going to say what I think, like, I don't know what it is.
I can't claim being a Jersey girl, but I have lived there part of my 13 years in that area. We did spend a lot of that time on the Jersey side, but I think that there's just some kind of confidence that people in Jersey have that people aren't going to tell you no, because people tell us no all the time, and
all the
we
time
have thick skin, and I think girls from Jersey have thick skin.
Yes. That's so interesting. What are some trends you're seeing right now in FemTech, and what are some things that you're hoping to see more of?
Well, some of the trends we're seeing, I just think it's so saturated, all of these tracking apps. Like, if you have a period tracking app, put it on the shelf and try something new, because it's so saturated. And I think, but I am really looking forward to people innovating more in the menopause category, because everybody focuses on contraception, IVF, and fertility, but what happens when fertility is over? Those people are suffering and there's nothing there. And I think one of the reasons is people that are innovating are younger, and so they don't have experience with menopause. So it's more challenging because it's like male trying to make a female product. Like, if you haven't undergone menopause, I think you see the situation looking for. And I feel like also the innovation ecosystem doesn't celebrate older entrepreneurs. And I would love for older women entrepreneurs to get into the space. And they, you know, people who have had careers in marketing and pharmaceuticals industry or in med tech, these are the people that we need to be designing for the menopause category. These are the people that really I'm encouraging to get into the game, because I think you would be able to come up with something better than, quite frankly, what I've seen in the market so far.
Yeah, it's a really, really interesting point. I wonder what like the average age of a FemTech founder is. And that's something maybe FemTech Focus could do. We love doing research and databases and stuff because, you know, how is even the pandemic potentially affecting, you know, women over 50 starting startups, right? Usually these are women taking care of their own parents, taking care of their family, their children, their offspring, they're taking care of their partner, right? And so it's like, are they also starting companies or not? And like, how can we support them more? Like, it's just another kind of scenario of women, you know, being bogged down and not being able to take these big risks, like starting a business and quitting your day job and just doing it, right?
Yeah. It is. And I think that some states are actually trying to think about that too. How can we support you in so that you can focus on running your business? So how can they provide funding, not just for the business, but for your life? Because
Childcare and
you know, there's a lot of single moms or people that would love to invent something and they just don't have the luxury of taking off and, not paying rent. And so there's so many good ideas and entrepreneurs out there that I don't think we're seeing because of these inequities and
yes.
financial situations.
Absolutely, 100%. Do you think FemTech is doing a good enough job? And I'm just speaking kind of generally as the industry. Are we doing a good enough job innovating for the non-affluent white woman? Because historically, that's who we've innovated for. So do you think we're starting to see companies that specifically targeting Latina women, Black women? Are we seeing that?
Well, I am, because I'm looking for it, right? You can put blinders on and not see anything out of your realm. I think that healthcare needs to be more equitable across, not only gender, but also ethnic. And we've seen during COVID disparities in certain populations. And I'm happy that that was highlighted so it can be addressed. And we're seeing a lot of culturally competent companies innovating. And those are the companies that we're looking for. We're looking for companies that are going to not just do commercial payer, but they're also going to the Medicaid mom, which is 78% of women having babies are on Medicaid. So we're like, okay, this population needs to be addressed. We're looking for people looking to address the maternal mortality rate for Black and Hispanic women, which is 3 to 4 times more overall. But in Jersey, it's 7 times more likely. And in New York, you're 10 times more likely to die if you're a Black woman. So these stats are frightening and they should be scary to people, and that should spur innovation to save lives. And so we're looking for companies that do address these populations. But again, that's a function of us having a diverse team. This is a function of me being a Black woman and understanding the needs more so than maybe some traditional VCs. But I do think that entrepreneurs are starting to think about how to address that part of the healthcare system as well.
Yeah, definitely. What about FemTech around the world? Does your fund just invest in US? And then also, what are you seeing just in terms of trends, whether you invest or not? Like, do you see other countries kind of really taking the lead here?
Yeah, so we look at also Israel. I think Israel's amazing for FemTech innovation. The IVF capital of the world, they're coming out with some great FemTech, great medical devices. So I've seen a lot of good innovation there, but I do believe innovation happens everywhere. And I think that it's born out of opportunity. And so I see things coming out of Africa and coming out of India that's really specific to those communities. And I do think that innovating locally and coming up with things that can work in your country makes a lot of sense. It's
Totally.
what I found is a challenge to take people innovating healthcare in other countries and try to bring it to the US because of our payer system, because our employer system. It's really complicated. And if you're not a part of it, it's really hard to understand how to navigate.
Yeah, no, totally. This has been so much fun. What are some of your like future goals for Steelsky, and what are some of your future goals for FemTech in general?
So one of our goals is born from a program that we just did a couple of weeks ago with two of our portfolio companies, Ruby Love and Zipline. Ruby Love has period underwear, and so Zipline was going into a new place in Africa where the women didn't have access to tampons or pads or other menstrual supplies, and they wanted to do a fundraiser. So what we did was we said, we can do one better. Let's bring them this sustainable period underwear so they don't run out, so that they can continue to wash it and not drop out of school. There's girls around the world, for those of you who don't know listening to this podcast, in places that are called period deserts, where they don't have access to menstrual products and they have to leave school for 10 days a month, or sometimes they just drop out completely. And so this shouldn't be happening. So what we did was we went to Ghana, and I flew over there, and we dropped these period underwear by drone to these remote villages.
Oh my gosh.
Ghana. It was amazing. We serviced over 2,000 girls on National Menstrual Day, and we talked to them about menstrual health, hygiene, and actually how to use the period underwear. So for that, normally, you throw the Ruby Love underwear into the washing machine, but over there, they don't have running water. So we would teach the girls how to go to the river, wash it, lay it in the sun, turn it over. And it was such an amazing experience. And so that's really what I want to continue to do with Steelsky, is use the collective efforts of our portfolio companies working together to spread more good around the world and create an impact. So right now we're actually looking, it was such a successful program that I met with the chiefs of all of these villages, and they were like, we need more. We wanted to do more of this. And so I want to do more too. So we're trying to figure out how to get funding so that we can continue to do this project around the world.
Oh my gosh, that is so beautiful. Are there like other causes around the world that you think Steelsky would like to get involved with? Like you're referring kind of the period poverty and African lack of access to products. Is there other like movements that we should be focusing on and people rallying around?
Well, I like to just be focused. Raising a fund and deploying it to 20 companies and helping them run the business is a tall order. So we're just focused on period poverty for now. And I mean, there's no dearth of things that need to be done around the world. So, but for us, this is something that we're uniquely positioned to do in a sustainable way, right? So it's good for the environment because you're not throwing away, these disposable products, and it's good for the girls. And so we're excited about expanding that program.
Yeah, speaking of sustainability, we actually just got asked yesterday by an LP that, are you taking in sustainability into account in your investments? And we said, well, I guess we were. We didn't know we were, but we are. Do you see that too in the FemTech companies, like taking sustainability into account?
It depends on the type of company, but I do think it's definitely in the back of everyone's mind. ESG is very top of mind for a lot of investors. And so I think it's trickling down to the startups as well.
Yeah, totally. Well, Maria, this has been so much fun. I have two last questions for you that our listeners love. We have a lot of aspiring FemTech founders, a lot of grad students and university students listening, which I'm so happy about because we're like we're inspiring the next wave. But what is an area in women's health and wellness that still needs innovating?
Well, like I said, I think there's a lot of opportunity in menopause, and there's a lot of opportunity in maternal mental health. I think we all know that, 1/3 of women are experiencing, postpartum depression, and it's just not been well treated. And so it's really innovating and finding effective ways to reach out to various communities to address this postpartum depression overall. I think women, we're stressed, we're overworked, we're dealing with family, we're dealing with our children, we're dealing with our parents, we're dealing with now becoming teachers because of Zoom school. And so I think it's very overwhelming and hard whether you've given birth or not. And so I think that we need to meet women where they are and provide different ways for them to be able to access services for mental health.
Yeah. I love the postpartum mental health part because, my sister had a baby last year. And so everyone was kind of prepping me for how to support her. And they were like, she's going to be really depressed, potentially even suicidal for 2 days after. And I'm like, we're all just okay with this. That's like, we're all like, women will just be suicidal with their new baby for a week. Like, and that's just, the hormones are all over and it's just like, we shouldn't be like, that's acceptable. Right?
2 days, more like 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years, she could still be in this way. Because if you don't treat it, how do you expect people to come out of it? Just the joy of being a mother is not enough to take you out of depression. That's what they'd like to tell you, and they make you feel bad. And it
Yeah.
shouldn't feel bad. This is a real thing. And I think that we need to be honest with each other, and we need to be honest with women, and tell them what they're going through is normal, and and share with them how they can actually get help.
Yes. And I also, last part on the mental health is, I've had an interview with Parla, and they are focusing on, supporting women when they have a pregnancy loss. And we were talking about how society says, don't tell anyone you're pregnant for the first 12 weeks, because in case you lose it, you might like make other people feel uncomfortable.
Exactly.
Wait, back up. Huh? Like, you lost a baby, like you lost your, like this thing, and you're supposed to keep it to yourself because like no one wants to hear about it. It's like, yeah, women need all the mental health support we can get.
Creates unnecessary shame. Everybody needs to go get Brene Brown books so then they can feel better about shame and learn how to compartmentalize it. But it's just like, this is unnecessary shaming of women who's had something that has no fault of their own happening.
Yeah, totally. Well, and Maria, our last question is, what do you think the femtech industry as a whole needs the most right now in order to be successful?
More female investors, more female venture funds that are willing to write checks to these women's health companies. That's really all it is. It's, these companies can't get funded if they don't have people willing to write checks. A lot of people aren't willing to write checks because we can't raise big enough funds, because people, they're selling their company to us, but we're selling their company also to the investors to give us money. And so we're all working in this chain together. And if we can't get the money that we need to prove out the sector isn't going to prosper.
That's right. Well, I love it. This has been amazing. We need to chat more often. If I need a pep talk or someone to commiserate, I think I found my girl, because I feel read today. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and best of luck with Coyote.